The river's water drags currents of invisible blood. The sky darkens without clouds. And there he stands, on the rotting dock, soaked coat, hat pulled low over his brow. Judge Roy Bean raises his arm, the silver pistol trembling in his grip. Before him, a figure made of dead flesh and ancient hatred. A drowned man who still breathes. By the law of Pecos, you're condemned. The sound of the trigger is just the beginning. If you ever smelled wet wood and gunpowder in the same breath, this story's for you. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? Has the Old West reached you? The sun rose crooked that day. It didn't warm the skin or chase away the mist rising from the Pecos River. A cold, thick vapor that clung to the ribs like the hand of a corpse. Langtry slept, or pretended to. The little town, where a saloon keeper with questionable morals and a quick trigger finger served as judge, lived its days without haste, until the church bell tolled. But no one was pulling the rope. Roy Bean was behind the bar, pouring whiskey for no one when he heard it. The ringing was hollow, funereal. He stepped out without a word, boots dragging through damp dust, leather coat flapping in the wind. When he reached the riverbank, he saw the coffin. It floated close to the shore, tangled in the branches of drowned trees. Old wood, swollen, nails nearly loose. No markings, no cross. Bean didn't call for a gravedigger. He called himself. He jumped into the water, hat still on, pulled the coffin to dry land, broke the lid with the butt of his gun. Inside there was no body, just skin, a human skin, stitched from end to end, glass eyes, a mouth without seams, and an inscription on the leather, tanned with salt and curse. Judge those who return. He stood slowly, staring south, where the river came from, dragging stories that should have died. It was a warning, or a challenge. Bean drew his holster, whistled for his horse, and spat in the mud. Let's see who rules the banks of this river. And the judge rode, but the sky was no longer the same, nor was the world. The trail along the Pecos was made of mud and silence. The judge rode like a man who knows where he's going, even if he doesn't know what he'll find. The saddle creaked. The leather brim of his hat dripped. Time seemed tied to the spur of his horse. Nothing stirred. No critter, no wind, only the sound of water and memories. Roy Bean wasn't a man who feared, but that skin, that inscription, judge those who return. It sounded like an invitation written with the fingers of someone no longer living. The mission became clear the moment he read it. The dead were returning, and there was no one to condemn them, no one except him. At the first bend of the river, the proof, a boat adrift, rocking in a weak whirlpool. Inside, two bodies, a man with a swollen face and a woman in a tattered dress, both with hands crossed over their chests. But that wasn't what caught his eye. It was a third occupant. Sitting at the bow, with a wet smile and eyes that didn't blink, was a boy, alive, small, pale skin, smeared with mud. Did you see them come out of the water? Bean asked, dismounting. The boy didn't answer. He only pointed. And there, on the opposite bank, walking among the trees, was a thing. It had the shape of a man, but it was taller than it should be, thinner. Its skin, or what passed for skin, was stitched together in patches, like scraps of other people. The face it had none, just holes, one to breathe, another to see. Roy Bean raised his revolver, but the thing vanished in the fog. Don't run, kid. The law's here. With the boy under his arm and his finger steady on the trigger, the judge understood his role. The sentence wasn't just for the living anymore. It was for everyone who crossed the river and came back. And there were many. The Old West always charged a steep price. Now it was coming for its change. They called it the walking skin. But no one knew who started calling it that. Maybe it was just the river's mouth whispering names in the dark. Maybe it was fear taking shape. Roy Bean followed the fog's tracks for 3 days. The boy didn't speak. He only watched, eyes too deep for a child. He slept with his eyes open, like someone afraid to wake up already dead. And every night, the skin knocked at the door. First came the drowned. People Langtry swore were buried. A preacher, a seamstress, 2 outlaws, all soaked to the soul. They rose from the river and marched through the brush, mute, with milky eyes. Each night, one more, always silent, always heading to the same place. The old mill where the Pecos curved and the water seemed to laugh. Bean set up camp there, dug trenches, set traps, prayed in silence, not for mercy, but to remind God he was still standing. On the 4th night, the drums came, dry sounds, like stretched hides beaten from the depths of the earth. The boy began to sing, an old song, without language, and then he spoke. He stitches those who forget, gathers those who weren't judged. Roy Bean loaded silver bullets, not out of superstition, but because iron no longer worked. At the mill's edge, among dead branches and crows too still, he saw it, the walking skin. It grew with every soul it swallowed. It didn't walk, it glided. Long arms, stitched with strips of sinew. In its chest, a black hole from which voices spilled. Voices of those Bean had already condemned. Innocent, guilty. Roy, why did you shoot? He faltered, just for a second. But doubt weighs heavier than lead. And the thing advanced. Not to kill, to show. In the walking skins world, every hasty sentence came back. Every rushed judgment demanded its price. And Roy Bean had debts unpaid. The judge didn't back down. He spat on the ground, raised an imaginary gavel, and shouted, "By the law of Pecos, I accuse you." The skin shuddered, and then it screamed back. The old mill groaned under the weight of the night, a sound with dying of age and secrets. The wind carried the stench of the river, and flesh that rotted but still moved. Judge Roy Bean stood in the center of the circle, a lonesome Western with no audience, just him, the mud, and the screaming silence. The walking skin glided before him, swallowing shadow and light. It was a monster made of memories, a cursed patchwork quilt stitched with the pain of the condemned. Its long hands, fingers made of strips, opened like claws and then retreated, as if knowing the cost of wrath. Bean swallowed hard, gripped the holster, and spoke with a voice that broke the silence. "Here, by the law of Pecos, every man, living or dead, has a right to trial, and I am the judge." The monster hissed voices, a symphony of accusation and regret, fragments of sentences, pieces of stories the judge had buried with his bullets. Every soul claimed, every flawed judgment, rose like a starving specter. Roy felt guilt tighten in his chest, felt the weight of every life that passed too quickly under his gavel. The walking skin wasn't just an enemy. It was a twisted mirror. With a hunter's speed, Bean drew his revolver, the metal glinting for a second under the moon. His aim was true, but the shot wasn't to kill. It was to remember, to judge. By the law, you have the right to hear your sentence, and I will deliver it. The shot sliced the air like thunder. The bullet tore through the night, through skin and shadow, and exploded in a scream that shook the ground and the river. The monster unraveled into floating scraps of skin, like dry leaves carried by the wind. The boy, motionless, watched, and Roy felt for the first time that the judge wasn't alone. The river flowed again, the fog lifted, and the moon cast a cold smile. Silence reclaimed its throne, but the law kept on being made, because in Pecos, justice never dies. The timid sun barely touched the horizon when Roy Bean dismounted. The mill, now calm, seemed like an old specter asleep. The river ran clean, carrying away the last shadow of that cursed night. But the air was heavy, as if justice there could never be complete, and the past would never stop whispering. The boy who had followed the judge vanished among the trees, leaving behind only wet footprints and a silence that said more than words. Roy looked at the waters, thinking of the soul still navigating unseen, trapped between time and judgment. He swallowed the road's dust, adjusted his hat, and smiled at the void, a hard, knowing grin, full of secrets only the old West understood. Deep down, he knew the walking skin might have been defeated but never killed, a legend that walks the banks of the Pecos, waiting for its next sentence. Roy Bean returned to Langtry, to his saloon, to his judge's chair. The town carried on with its sins and secrets, and the law he upheld there was the only thing keeping chaos at bay. The law west of Pecos never slept. If you like this dark legend, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Want to know which Old West legend will face the next sentence? Write it here and get ready for more stories where the dust is the witness and justice, a shadow